Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are very fortunate to be talking with this 81-year young gentleman, Bill Seymour. He is a poker author, teacher, poker player, and recently during COVID started a group, a social media group, to talk about the quote unquote good old days back in the 90s and early 2000s before the moneymaker boom. And so many people were enamored with all of these stories, including our good friend, Linda Johnson, that they all encouraged Bill to write a book, and he has done so, entitled Life's Memories, Friendships, and a Touch of Poker. It's a compilation of all of the short stories by our guest, Bill Seymour. You can get that book on Amazon. Bill, talk, I gave a little brief summary of how that book kind of came about, but talk a little bit about why you even started the social media group and why you got this group together during COVID. Obviously, it was a difficult time and a great time to connect with a lot of people, right?
Okay. Yeah. I actually started it out of boredom. Okay. Now, I had retired from active circuit play in 2011. All right. So fast forward to 2020, right? A lot of my old poker friends from all over the United States, all over the world, actually, by 2020, we had emails, we had opportunities, and I'm sitting there and I said, let me start a group, right? I didn't know how to do it. So I called my friend Kathy Raymond, right, who's the director at the time of the Venetian, director of poker operations at Venetian, and fantastic lady, fantastic CEO of everything, right? And she actually put the group together, but then I became administrator of it, and the objective behind it, I wanted to reconnect with old poker friends. Some examples: Max and Marie Stern, Marsha Wagner, Max Shapiro, Andy Block. These people, they're all members of my group now, right? And to name a few, some of the Foxwoods crew, Jeff Albert, Frank Sidori, right? Who was out of Foxwoods, Steen and Lynn Rasso, Rassow from Canada, a couple that plays poker with the group. They're all part of the intricate group, right? But so my thought was, I want to just reconnect so we can all say hello to each other, right? And my idea to start the group was to put them all in touch in a forum where we all could contribute to it. Wrong. That's not the way it worked out. I put it all together, and I started writing. I actually started off writing all poker stories. All right. Which I wrote every day, all right? And then as time went by a little bit, right, nobody else is writing anything. So they're all expecting a story from me. And that is the way it is to this day. Now, it grew quickly, right? But the stories that are in this book are all stories that actually, as Linda Johnson put it to me in such a way that said, you better write this book, is I never knew what I was going to talk about. And that's the facts. My days would be, and it still is to this day, to this morning, as a matter of fact, right? Right. Every day I'd get up, have coffee, head in my office, and sit down and not have a clue what I was going to say that day. I'd drum my fingers a little, and then a thought would come into my head. And it might be about poker, it might be about life, it might be about family, whatever it was. It might be something silly like Igor the caveman was a story that I wrote. And this I start typing, right? And as Linda put it, Linda equated it to when she owned Cardplayer, she used to have to write an editorial every week, right?
Right.
And she said, it would take me all week long. She says, Bill, you do it all naturally. When you sit down, by the time you get done telling your story, right, you've not only got everybody involved, you tell the here, what, and why you're doing the story, and whatever the storyline is. And when I'm set and I'm done with it, as time went by, I guess I learned to articulate it a little bit better, and before you know it, I've got 400 pages of story.
Wow.
Right.
So these are all written stories that you sent out to everyone.
These are all for members and members of 90s poker group.
Right. And so you wrote the stories via email and sent them out to everyone. It wasn't like a video.
No,
or
I
anything
wrote them
like
right
that.
on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a group on Facebook, right?
Right.
And so I would open it every morning where it says write something, and I'd sit down and I'd start typing. So and these stories are all actually lengthwise. That's what makes the book. Myself personally, I call it my great bathroom book, because
Great.
all the
Great.
stories in this book here,
Yeah.
that right here, all the stories in this book are probably no longer than 1 to 1.5 pages. If I could hold it and just flip through a little bit,
Right.
you see all sorts of headings, right? And it's a compilation of what I wrote every day, right? It could, and like I said, as time went by, it just grew and grew and grew until, Linda Johnson and a few other knowledgeable friends of mine. I'm not a writer. Nolan Dahl is a writer.
Right.
Peter Alston's a writer, right? I am not a writer of poker or anything, but I have a gift of gab, and they tell me that I'm a good storyteller, and that's how it all came about. It started with the COVID, for me having something to do, and then now it's almost. I'd probably get strung up by my thumbs if I didn't write an article at least 5 out of 7 days of the week.
Wow.
Right?
So you're still doing it. Yeah.
Oh, I still do it. Right to this morning I did it. Yesterday morning I did it out. Right.
Yeah.
So I do this out of pleasure.
Yeah.
That's the key part. It's I have tried to at times get somebody else to please put a post up here, right? But they all want me to do the post anyway. So that's how the book came about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because to be quite frank about it, I have many poker stories. I have many poker friends, and so the result of all of that ends up with this great book, which to me, if I had to do it, it would have never been put together, right? I didn't even know you could do it. It was suggested to me by then that by Linda or somebody said, all your stories are saved on Facebook? I said, no, I don't know that, because I'm an idiot on the computer. I own up to it. I admit it. I can play poker with the best of them. But when it comes to Facebook, it took me almost a year to learn how to cut and paste.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So when my defaults, I own up to, but they told me the stories are all there. So I actually had my niece, Tammy, who said, Uncle Bill, I can do that for you. And she cut and pasted the whole thing into Word in one afternoon. It would have taken me 3 years. So as a result of that, and some other good connections with that aided me and encouraged me to write the book, right? We did a book, and the end result is here it was. It got published the 1st of April.
Right.
And
so let's talk about a couple of these stories. I know that there's some real good ones. Let's talk one about a gentleman who unfortunately passed away and was a very dear friend of ours. He's been on the show as well. But Gavin Smith, he was a good friend of yours, right?
Gavin Smith goes back to when he was from Toronto area, and he started out coming to Foxwoods.
Right.
Okay. Now, Gavin Smith, for all those that know him, God bless him, right? And for those that didn't know him, but knew him by name, became very proficient. But there wasn't a moment, if you were around Gavin, that he didn't make you laugh.
Yeah, right. Of course. That's
And
just who he was.
That's just who he was, right? And there's a couple of stories that stick out with me with Gavin. We all know he liked to take a little nip of booze once in a while, right?
Right.
So there's one night, this took place at Foxwoods, right? And Gavin is playing in a satellite at 2:30 in the morning, right? And myself and Jim Boyd walked by Gavin, and Gavin is sitting there. They're down to 4 people, and Gavin says, "Hey, Bill, Jim, come here. Like, right. And we get over there, right? I'm playing the satellite, right? Yeah, okay, Gavin, right? He has got sitting on a seat beside him $10,000 in two wrappers, just sitting on the seat. So we took it. All right. We went immediately to Mike Ward, who was tournament director back then.
Right. Of course.
And we let them know that we had the money, right?
Yep.
So they wouldn't accuse us of stealing. Well, Gavin didn't even know he lost it. And the next day, we all had memberships to the High Rollers Lounge and the 8th floor lounge, which I'm sure you probably have been in.
Yeah.
Here and there, a nice comp for us, right? And we're up there with Gavin the next day. He doesn't know he lost some money, and we asked Gavin, "Are you missing anything?" He said, "No, I don't know." Right? Well, we handed him $10,000, right? And that was Gavin. That was typical Gavin, right? Is that he didn't know. Now here's a good story, that Gavin's story happened on the 8th floor. I won a tournament the day before the main event. Okay. I walk into the 8th floor. For those of you that don't know, what we are talking about here is at Foxwoods Casino, they had a very elaborate 8th floor lounge. Right. That was, with free food and some good upscale. It's a nice place to relax and whatnot. So few of the more well-known players, poker players, that was part of our comps via Kathy Raymond at the time, who was director of operations there, right? That will allow us entry to the 8th floor. But anyway, I go through the door on the 8th floor, right? And Gavin yells from the crowd, "Seymour, get over here." He said, "Give me $500. Now, anyone who knew Gavin can understand exactly how I'm saying this. I'm going, "Why?" And he goes, "We got to get Scotty Byron in the tournament." right? And he says, so you just won yesterday. Give me $500. You're going to have 10% of it, right? And so I did. All right. And so did several. This is what I'm saying. Back then, nowadays you got the stake, the stake people and whatnot, but back then we were just a community, right? We bought percentages of each other, right? You know, and so that they could play, you know, and it was just a way of doing it. And the difference is back then, you only, you know, the norm was if you were staked, you played for 50%. Nowadays, some of these players that are getting staked are playing for like 10% or 15% and whatnot, right? So we staked Scotty, right? And I don't know if you do you know Scotty Byron?
Yeah, I think I recognize the name. Yeah.
Well, Scotty ended up going to work for Poker Stars, you know, over in the Isle of Man. He's a very young man, nice man from New York City, right? Along with Michael May, another nice young man, right? But Scotty goes on. I go home, right? I get home, I get a phone call, and it's from Gavin. He goes, Bill, I got your money. I said, what money? He says, while you were looking up on the map, Scott Byron won the tournament. I forget what he won, but my share was something like in the $8,000 price range.
Bonus.
And I told Gavin, I said, whatever you do, hold on to it. Gavin goes, what are you talking about? Gavin, don't lose my money. Right?
Don't leave it on the side of the table and have somebody pick it up.
So yeah, so that's just one of many stories. There's another. That's I could tell you the beginning of No Limit in Atlantic City.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's very interesting because obviously, like we talked about in the 90s, it was a very limit-based game. Obviously, No Limit slowly boomed with Moneymaker, but talk a little about an AC, and also because in Atlantic City and a lot on the East Coast, Stud was the game. It really wasn't about Hold'em. Hold'em was more of a West Coast game at the time. So talk about that birth of No Limit Hold'em and AC. That'd be interesting.
Well, it's actually quite interesting because they wouldn't spread it.
Right.
So this is a 1 week in circa. I'm gonna have to say late 90s.
Yep.
Or early, maybe around the year 2000. Yeah. I'm getting old. I can't remember years. I can remember poker hands from 40 years ago, but I get the years mixed up, right? But whatever, as you said, there was no such thing as No Limit. So myself, Jim Boyd, and Craig DeSalvo were at the Tropicana. Okay. And we'd been there because Trop had $100 No Limit tournament that once a week, which very difficult to even get No Limit spread in any form or format at all. They didn't want nothing to do with it, right? So, but Trop did have it. So all three of us are out of the tournament, all right? And this is on a Friday night. So we're sitting at an empty table and we just had an idea. I mean, we are by nature, the three of us, tournament junkies.
Yep.
Right? If I'm not playing tournaments, I was playing satellites 24/7, which is where I made a lot of my money. All right. But what took place is this, right? We asked the floor person, a gentleman by the name of TK. Forgive me, I think I have it in my book, but it's somewhere in there. It's his actual name, but it slips me right now. But we said, can we do this, right? It just between the three of us, we each want $200 worth of red chips, right? Which is a $5 chip, right? And I said, we'll pay time, and we want to hold a mini tournament with just the three of us, just boring to kill time.
Right.
So he seen no problem with that, right? So he said, sure, go ahead. He brought us a dealer. We each bought $200 for chips. We're sitting there playing, and I'm ahead in it, and a player, a local player by the nickname of Doc. I don't know what his last name is, but he was a whale. Okay. For those that don't know what a whale means, he was a big sucker in poker. Okay.
Right.
And he walked over to our table and said, what is this? And we said, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, I want to play. Well, if you can't hold a table, right? And we just said, okay. He sat down and he popped about $600 on the table. And then Joe Moon, I don't know if you know Joe Moon or not. He's a local from AC. Joe Moon comes over. Then Nikki, another local from AC, comes over. Right. Next thing you know, we got a table full, and we're playing 5-10, no limit. Right. Well, I let the game go for the night. Okay. And we ended up playing till 4 o'clock in the morning. And so when the game broke, we all agreed to come back at noon the next day, right? And play no limit, right? When we got back, it had been discussed, and they said they had a little section roped off of one table. And the only people allowed to sit down at that table were the people that played it the day before. There was no board, no list for it, right? They let us play. The game petered out, right? And then they said, you don't come back. You can't spread it anymore. Now, to shorten the length of this whole story, which they can read about in the book in depth, right? Throughout the course of 1 week's time, we went from Tropicana to Bally's to resorts to Showboat, and we end up the following Friday at the Taj Mahal. All right. And Tom Gito let us spread the no limit. But here's the way it was allowed to be spread. We buy-in of $300, maximum buy-in $1,000 with a rake and 5-10 limit or no limit hold'em. Right. Well, all the young guys are going 5-10 no limit hold'em, $300 buy-in. Yeah, they're going what? So anyway, we played it all day, all night, and a few guys lost a lot of money. They see no limit was not popular. A lot of people didn't understand it. A few of us that were there that started it, we were no limit players. They weren't, right? And so there's one guy, you may even know him by name, Egyptian Mike was his nickname, right? Egyptian Mike sat down at the game, and he kept buying in for $300, and he ended up blowing about, I don't know, call it a couple 3,000, right?
Yeah.
And then he went over to his 100-200 game. Which he was him and Kondo and a few other ones that played on a weekly basis, right?
Right.
Okay, so we come back the next day, and we go in, and this is what was said to us. Tom Gito come over, and for those who don't know who Tom Gito was, he was I guess director of poker operations for the top, probably equivalent to what Kathy Raymond did, right? And so he come over and he said, you can spread the game, but this is how it's going to have to be. It's going to be $1,000 buy-in, right? And you're going to have to play it 10 1/4, right? So we said, well, okay, we'll do it, right? Well, 4 of us sat down, myself, Joe Moon, Jim Boyd, and Craig DeSalvo, right? And nobody else came. The night before, we had 50 names on the board, all right? But the same people that would buy in for 300 wouldn't put up 1,000. Right. So that was the beginning and the end of No Limit in Atlantic City for the next 3 or 4 years. But we did actually have the birth of it.
There. Well, all of these stories and many more are in Bill's book, Life's Memories, Friendships, and a Touch of Poker. Go to Amazon.com and you can get these stories, and there's so many more. Bill, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your memories. And we thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.
I can't say, it's been my pleasure. Anybody that knows me knows I love people and I love to talk. So we're natural.
Well, perfect fit, Bill. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show. Everyone, stay tuned. We'll have more interviews coming up. We'll talk more about the world of poker. And as always, may you always go in with the best hand, and may you never get unlucky. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.